What began in 2014 as a lean, low-budget thriller about a grieving man and his dog was never supposed to change the industry. Yet this modest revenge tale somehow resurrected an entire genre and launched a sprawling cinematic universe. It also achieved the impossible by turning a former stunt double into one of Hollywood's premier visionary directors, while giving Keanu Reeves the defining role of a new generation. The franchise experienced a box office trajectory that is practically unheard of in modern Hollywood, with each new chapter vastly outperforming the last. From a quiet $86 million debut, the series exploded into a massive flagship property, collectively grossing over $1 billion worldwide. Critics were equally captivated, awarding the film's incredibly consistent Rotten Tomatoes scores that climbed from a strong 86% all the way to a staggering 94% for the fourth installment. But how exactly did a straightforward story about a retired hitman escalate into a sprawling global phenomenon with its own complex mythology? And what happens when a series strips away the prevailing trends of early 2000s action cinema to build a completely new, hyper-stylized world from the ground up? Let's trace the bloody, breathtaking evolution of the ultimate modern action epic. When we first meet John Wick, he is a man defined by absence. His house is too large, his days are too quiet, and the camera frames him in isolating, sterile light to emphasize the void left by his late wife. The inciting incident, a brutal home invasion that strips him of his last tether to humanity, is shot with a terrifying, grounded intimacy. John is left battered and bloodied on his own floor, establishing a baseline of profound physical vulnerability. He isn't introduced as a superhero. He is a grieving widower whose peaceful facade has been violently shattered. But when John takes a sledgehammer to his basement floor, he isn't just unearthing a hidden arsenal. He is physically breaking the seal on his buried past. The cinematography shifts, trading the desaturated tones of his civilian grief for the stark, high-contrast shadows of a neo-noir thriller. Director Chad Stahelski, drawing on his extensive background in stunt coordination, immediately establishes a new visual language for action cinema. Instead of the frantic, shaky cam and rapid-fire editing that dominated the previous decade, the camera pulls back. It holds steady, allowing the audience to witness the brutal, unbroken geometry of the choreography. This commitment to spatial clarity reaches its first crescendo in the Red Circle nightclub sequence. Bathed in deep blues and violent neon pinks, John executes a tactical ballet of gun fu, a seamless blending of close-quarters martial arts and precision shooting. The sound design treats every gunshot like a percussive beat in a musical score, while the editing deliberately showcases the mechanics of survival, including the necessity of reloading. It is a masterclass in visual storytelling, proving that action itself can be character development. We understand John's legendary status, not just because other characters whisper about the Baba Yaga, but because we see the ruthless, mechanical efficiency with which he dismantles his enemies. Yet, beneath the kinetic thrill of the revenge plot, the first film quietly plants the seeds of a sprawling mythology. When John hands over a heavy gold coin to enter the Continental Hotel, we are introduced to a hidden, parallel society operating right beneath the surface of New York City. This underworld has its own currency, its own specialized cleanup crews, and, most importantly, its own rigid code of conduct. At the center of this society sits Winston Scott, the enigmatic manager of the Continental, who initially presents himself as a benevolent, neutral patriarch. By providing John with the location of his target, Winston breaks his own code of neutrality, signaling a personal affection that will be severely tested as the franchise expands. If the first film is a story about a man pulling himself back into the underworld, Chapter 2 is about the underworld refusing to let him go. The introduction of the blood marker fundamentally shifts the franchise's thematic engine from personal vengeance to inescapable obligation. Santino D'Antonio arrives not as a physical threat, but as a bureaucratic one. wielding an ancient, magical oath that John cannot simply shoot his way out of. This forces John out of his localized New York habitat and into a global arena, expanding the world-building to the ancient ruins and opulent high society of Rome. The criminal underworld is no longer just a network of hitmen. It is an international aristocratic society bound by centuries-old laws. As the scope widens, so does the ambition of the action choreography. Stahelski begins to treat his set pieces as elaborate, stylized art installations. The catacombs sequence highlights the tactile, bespoke nature of the assassin's trade, perfectly set up by the tactical sommelier scene that treats weaponry with the reverence of fine wine. But it is the climactic mirror maze sequence that pushes the visual language into the realm of the surreal. Visually echoing Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, the infinite reflections serve as a metaphor for John's fractured identity, a man trapped in a labyrinth of his own violent history, unable to find an exit. This entrapment pushes John to commit the ultimate transgression, executing Santino on the sacred, neutral grounds of the Continental. With a single pull of the trigger, John breaks the core commandment of his world. This moment is the true inciting incident for the rest of the entire franchise. It transforms the overarching narrative into a relentless study of rules and consequences. By defying the system, John unwittingly declares war on the very bureaucracy that birthed him, setting the stage for a conflict of mythic proportions. Chapter 3. Parabellum picks up exactly where Chapter 2 left off, dropping the audience into a state of sheer, breathless panic. The administrative switchboard sequences, with their retro-analog technology and tattooed operators, emphasize the cold, mechanical efficiency of the high table. When John's excommunicado status is activated, the global bounty turns every shadow, every bystander, and every alleyway into a potential threat. The physical toll on John becomes the central focus of the cinematography. He is no longer the untouchable boogeyman. He is a bleeding, limping survivor forced to stitch his own wounds and fight with whatever is at hand, from antique throwing knives to library books. To survive, John must navigate the upper echelons of the Underworld's hierarchy, leading to a massive expansion of the lore. We are introduced to the Adjudicator, a chilling embodiment of the High Table's absolute, emotionless authority, and the Elder, a figure who resides above the table itself. John's desperation culminates in the desert, where he severs his own ring finger and surrenders his wedding band to the Elder. It is a devastating image of submission, proving that in this universe, no one is above the rules, and defiance demands a pound of flesh. Simultaneously, the Bowery King, introduced in the previous film as a petty rival, is brutally punished with 7 cuts for aiding John, transforming him from an underground crime lord into a scarred, radicalized revolutionary. As the world building reaches mythic proportions, the action design becomes wildly inventive. Stahelski integrates weaponized animals, placing combat dogs alongside human performers in a breathtaking display of synchronized chaos. John literally rides a horse through the neon-drenched streets of New York, battling assassins on motorcycles, blurring the lines between modern thriller and classic Western. The climax, set within a multi-tiered glass structure inside the Continental, is a visual metaphor for transparency and fragility. It is here that Winston reveals his true nature. Prioritizing his empire over his loyalty, he shoots John off the roof to appease the Adjudicator, proving that in the end, the institution always protects itself. By the time Chapter 4 begins, the narrative has transcended its gritty neo-noir roots to become a sprawling operatic epic. The Marquis de Gramont represents the ultimate evolution of the High Table's villainy, a man of limitless resources, draped in high fashion, who views human life purely as a commodity. John, now allied with the radicalized Bowery King, realizes that a war of attrition is unwinnable. He cannot outshoot a global bureaucracy. Instead, he must weaponize the High Table's own ancient traditions against them, invoking the formal rules of a one-on-one duel to secure his permanent freedom. This structural shift allows the filmmakers to push the boundaries of action cinema to dizzying, unprecedented heights. The cinematography in Chapter 4 is a triumph of lighting and spatial awareness, peaking in an extraordinary top-down, continuous tracking shot utilizing Dragon's Breath incendiary rounds. The camera glides effortlessly above the destruction, transforming a brutal firefight into an illuminated, fiery video game homage that redefines how action is captured on film. Every set piece is designed to test the absolute limits of John's mythic endurance. He survives being hit by multiple cars at the Arc de Triomphe, thrown through plate glass windows, and battered by endless waves of heavily armored adversaries. Nowhere is this physical toll more poignant than the grueling Sisyphean ascent up the 222 steps of the Sacré-Cœur. After fighting his way to the top, John is kicked all the way back to the bottom, a visceral metaphor for his entire journey. He is a man constantly punished for trying to climb his way out of hell. When he finally reaches the summit for the duel, the thematic engine of the franchise comes to a brilliant, quiet conclusion. John doesn't win by being a faster shot. He wins by understanding the rules better than the Marquis, holding his fire, and delivering the fatal blow with the word, consequences. Looking at the 4 films as a cohesive collection reveals a staggering artistic evolution. What began as an intimate, localized revenge thriller steadily morphed into a sprawling, mythological epic that redefined modern action cinema. The franchise's commitment to practical stunt choreography, spearheaded by Chad Stahelski, completely shifted the industry away from the chaotic editing of the early 2000s, proving that audiences crave visual clarity and physical performance. The gun fu style, with its long, continuous takes and neon-drenched aesthetics, has become a gold standard, imitated but rarely equaled. But the spectacle is only half the equation. The true genius of the collection lies in its intricate world-building and thematic consistency. The overarching narrative acts as an extended meditation on systemic control and individual autonomy. The High Table, the Continental, the gold coins, and the blood markers form an inescapable mythological bureaucracy. Every character is trapped by these rules. Winston plays the political game to maintain his sanctuary, the Bowery King tries to subvert the system from the gutters, and John Wick simply tries to break out. Across 4 chapters, we watch a man slowly transform from a flesh-and-blood widower into a supernatural entity, fueled purely by sheer will and the memory of love. His ultimate victory is not conquering the underworld, but finally earning the right to leave it. When John peacefully slumps over on the basilica steps, succumbing to his accumulated wounds, it is the only fitting end to his arc. He doesn't die as the Baba Yaga, the feared assassin of legend. He dies free, remembered simply as requested, as a loving husband. Beneath the relentless spectacle of flying brass and shattered glass, this saga is ultimately a tragedy about the sheer exhaustion of endurance. We watch a man fighting not to conquer an empire, but simply to earn the right to be left alone with his memories. It leaves us with a profound sense of melancholy, proving that sometimes the heaviest burden a person can carry is their own inescapable nature. Even as this universe expands outward with a new television series, an animated prequel, and a standalone film for Donnie Yen's Kane, the shadow of the man in the suit remains absolute. The franchise has permanently altered the DNA of modern cinema, raising the bar for practical performance to impossible heights. In the end, the true triumph of this series isn't how many adversaries fell, but how it made us care so deeply about a ghost who just wanted to finally go home.